Seldom do I ever draw a crowd like this.
No, think they're not here for me.
Okay, we are recording and live streaming when you are ready.
It is 11 o'clock according to my cell phone. So we'll call this meeting together of the Finance and Administration Committee. Our first order of business is the call to order, which I did. We have approval of the agenda. Any changes in the agenda desired?
None for me, sir.
We'll consider it approved then. Do we need to take a motion on that?
You do not. You can do it at chairman's call.
We'll do it at chairman's call then. We'll do a call to the public. We have a lot of familiar faces here. Coming here for one reason or another. We'll find out. Anybody online?
There is not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, there'll be a second opportunity later in the meeting. First item of business then is personnel policy changes to enhance recruitment. It's a discussion.
Yeah, so this was a latecomer item to the agenda that came from department meeting discussion last Thursday morning. One of our elected officials brought to the table that if we're having issues recruiting new hires or retaining employees, even new hires sometimes, maybe we ought to look at our personnel policies for new hires. We have a couple of perhaps archaic policies. One is, we do maintain a 6-month probationary period for new hires, and within that 6 months, they are not allowed to utilize PTO. So they will actually accrue it from their date of hire, and it'll accumulate, but they don't actually earn it until that 6-month probationary period is done. Then that PTO hour, those PTO hours come into their bank and they're able to utilize. Another rather archaic policy is that for 60 days after hire, new hires are not eligible to receive holiday pay. So depending on when you hire in throughout the year, that can be kind of a hit, certainly. So the discussion among the department heads and electeds last week were that perhaps we need to revisit the policy because agendas hadn't gone out yet for finance. And I knew, the only thing on the agenda really was invoices and budget update, that there would be time to have this discussion today. So our new executive assistant, Ryan Chess, went through the personnel policy and highlighted and tabbed for you sections relevant to this discussion so that we're not just looking at one section and not other sections that might reference it. So it's on the agenda for discussion. We can come out of this discussion with a mocked up policy that you could recommend for action Tuesday, or we could continue the discussion. Really, obviously, you're in charge of that, but that's sort of how the issue was brought forward.
Chairman, I was fortunate enough to be at that meeting with the heads of the departments. Been very fruitful, and I appreciate folks who did bring forth some of the issues that we have with our current personnel policy manual. And I think it's a good idea that we really do look at this in a very thorough manner in order to make sure that not only are we taking care of the employees we have here currently, but for all of our new hires, we talked before about this idea of being the place to go. We want to be the premier employer as far as county governments are concerned. So I think this is a good start.
So the first item was just talking about the PTO accumulating it, not accumulating in the first 6 months. Until you get beyond that, then you do get it.
Yes.
I'm not sure that, I think that would be a big game changer in retention or attraction of an employee.
You know, there's
my
some
thoughts.
surprise, since we've been intimately involved in onboarding efforts recently. There is always some surprise by new hires that they have to wait that 6 months. And I know for new hires and admin, there's always a conversation with myself and the new employee that goes something like, I recognize it's pretty hard to go 6 months without any days off. So the employee always has the option to take that time off unpaid. Or I'm always open to flexing of time too, generally within a pay period. So there's options. We do work with new hires, but I don't know that all department heads and electeds do that. I feel like they do probably, but there certainly could be some departments that are hard and fast.
Chairman, one thing I found is, in my past life, this was a problem for me. This was with a very large company, and they were pretty stuck on this idea of you got to work 6 months before you can take any kind of paid time off. And I would lose potential management trainees because they would go somewhere else, but that was a benefit, that they knew that if something happened, if they have kids or something happened, they could take the time. And one thing about, if we were to make an adjustment here to this in some way where they're allowed to take the time off, it's still built into our budget. I don't think it's going to have a negative impact in terms of our financial situation at all. But I think on the flip side of that, it's an added incentive for people who might want to consider onboarding with us. So that's my opinion on that.
Not a big issue with me. I just wanted to see the justification for it.
I do know our courts have discussed what they're doing over there for new hires. They essentially grant 2 days to a new hire that they can use paid within 6 months. If they use those, then it comes off of that bank after the probationary period that is put into their time. So if they use those 2 free days, if you will, then they are paid at the time. So a new hire doesn't have to go unpaid and then taken from the bank. That it sounds like, something that we could administer in admin, but something additional to administer too. So I don't know if really that's the answer, but there's definitely value in an employee having a PTO bank, right? We want to make sure employees are using PTO for how it's intended. But certainly if an employee would want to earn PTO and then utilize it right away, it's available, up to them.
As far as from an administrator standpoint, I know for myself, where I've been in situations where they're allowed to use their paid time off in their first 6 months. But let me back this up a little bit. You find out more about an employee the 2 weeks after their 6 month probation is up than you will the entire 6 months prior. So if you allow them to take the paid time off, you're going to get a real feel for who that person is. And what it'll do is allow you to determine, is this someone I want to keep on? Is this someone I want to continue with? Because they're having a lot of issues. They're not being able to fulfill the duties that they were hired to fulfill. Usually that's been the case for me, is that I'll find out really, really quick on whether or not there's somebody that's dependable, somebody I can count on, somebody to get the job done. As opposed to after the probationary period, where you've got a whole process you got to go through. But that's me.
That's a nifty, sinister tool.
Well, I'm just saying you can be surprised.
So we've had the discussion, and most of the pages that are marked, I know we get down here to page 13 or something.
Next one.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's the holiday pay.
Well, we can have that discussion
Next,
too, I suppose, in as we work through this. Really, it's a little archaic, but any new hire does not receive holiday pay for until 60 days, until after they've been here 60 days. It kind of opens up room for error and payroll, right? We always have to be cognizant of how long has someone been here? Are they able to earn? Are we?
so basically, we're punishing them
We are.
in a way.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem with
Cause I
changing that.
got looking at this and I thought, well, if I got hired on November 10th,
After holidays.
smoke, I lose 2, 4, 6 holidays. Whereas if I get hired sometime in July, August, ooh, I don't miss any. I'm not taking a job here until July 5th, you know, so I don't miss any. So, and it's already built into our budget, correct?
It is.
Really is, I mean-
You know, thank you, Melissa, for joining that conversation Thursday, because as I wrap my head around it, we budget for that, but we don't ever presume, oh, we're gonna have a new hire in a department. Let's adjust holidays, because we never know what point of the year they would come on. So we budget to pay the holiday. So just as we budget them to work that day. So there wouldn't be any adjustment
Wouldn't be
budget wise.
adverse.
Obviously, it'd be a hit to the budget because we wouldn't pay them. We are not paying them holidays now, and we would be, but we budget for it.
I give it minimal at best.
Yes.
So it's really a chance thing when somebody comes on and
Mhm.
And I think it's just fair to provide the same holiday to all
I
employees.
think it's equitable for everybody, you know?
Okay, so let's look through this with that conversation in light. If we start on page 3 for that reference, for the first 6 months of a regular employee's employment, she should not receive, accumulate, or be entitled to use accrued paid time off.
Just drop the
And
dot.
we're just striking that whole paragraph about that then, essentially.
Or
okay.
yeah, just take off the knot or to get rid of the whole thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Brian went through to see if this is referenced anyplace else in the document.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. I
Thank you,
think
Brian.
The next page 8, where PTO is referenced, I don't know that has to change. Page 8 notes, employees are required to use comp time before using accrued vacation days, personal days, or PTO. I think that remains as is.
Yep, I'm good with that.
Page 13, holiday pay would be the next. So all regular full-time employees who have completed 60 calendar days of employment and meet eligibility requirements will receive 1 day. So we would just strike the completed 60 calendar days of employment and just say all regular full-time employees who meet the eligibility requirements.
Yep.
And then you'd have to add Juneteenth into that.
We should, as long as we are updating policy. Good catch.
Yep. That's good.
See, page 15 talks about the accrual rate. Accumulation of PTO doesn't change. Use of PTO doesn't change. But number 4 is probationary period.
Mhm.
See
On page
that?
116.
16.
Yep, page 4, okay.
So I guess actually, to be clear, let's keep probationary period and we'll just say PTO shall be permitted to be used during an employee's probationary period.
Drop the
And,
knot.
and scratch the rest of that. So
Mhm. Okay.
next one, page 17 goes into, this is accumulation of sick leave for pre-PTO employees. So this is back before when the county had sick vacation and personal time for all employees instead of a move to PTO. And so at the time, there were certain employees who had accumulated sick time per the policy, and per this policy, we're allowed to carry it forward.
Okay.
I don't think that any of that language would change, because that's all referencing employees hired before 1982. God bless you, anyone
Thank you.
still here from hired before 1982.
Okay.
Thank you for your service. And then it talks about employees hired after 82, but before the date of conversion in 95. They're paid 50% of accumulated and unused sick This must be at their time of separation or retirement. So that language wouldn't change because that's actually that language is really
Grandfathered in, yeah. Pretty well established.
And I do believe that is all inclusive of the references. We'll go through to look again, but if you're willing, we can mock up policy. We can have it attached to the agenda for Tuesday's meeting. If you want to recommend those changes to the full board. The way this came forward, I didn't want to hold it up a couple more weeks and write a there's no reason to write a staff report. We all know the problems we're having with recruitment and attraction and retention. So I wanted to bring this forward as soon as possible. And if you're willing, you want to move those changes forward, we'll mock it up. Full board consideration.
I'm good with the recommended changes. I don't see it as being a big cost to the county, and maybe there's other things we can do in the future to continue down the path of becoming more of a friendly employer to attract people.
Before I make that motion, is there any chance you could open this up to anyone sitting in the audience to see if there's anything that we might have missed that they'd like to see us at least look at?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman can absolutely.
We've heard the discussion on PTO and holiday, and as it relates to employees, any issues with what we're
Anything else?
Considering doing?
Take a look at. We'll make sure we're covering everything.
Other than the part-time, and I think there were some issues with part-time, getting additional holidays that had to be
So-
worked out, but that was the only other thing that I can think of. In trying to move forward to get our target employees, because our target employees, I think, are those that we can retain. And we want to make them feel welcome when they come in, instead of, you can't do this, you can't do that, we're blocking you from this, we're discriminating against you for that. I think if we make them feel welcome, and make it a lot easier for them to acclimate when they come, they're going to have a better impression of us and want to stay.
Do you think we can be more inclusive in terms of the benefits that we offer, whether it's paid time off, holidays? We can feel more of a part of the team as opposed to
Yes,
a
because I think
separate group entirely.
the way things, the old standard kind of discriminated against someone who had a family, because we all know daycare is an issue in this area. If you have several young children, the chances of your coming into county employment and not having an occasion where you had to take off in 6 months if you have young children is kind of unrealistic in today's world.
And I look at part-time, really two different types of part-time people. One is basically part-time permanent, and then you have like seasonal for parks and recreation, maybe seasonal for some other departments, and might have to look at that angle too.
Thoughts, Madam Administrator? Hate to
So
put you on the spot, but
for the additional, I was just looking in policy where it was. So for the additional comment regarding part-time employees, so regular part-time employees, regardless of the changes we just talked about, still only receive holiday pay based on their regularly scheduled hours. So it is prorated from the 7.5 hour day, Christmas Day and New Year's Day.
that's it.
That's it. So that would be, that's found on page 101-24.
Okay, so
So if we're gonna add that into the discussion, I think we ought to look at that.
be available to them the same schedule that we have for full-time employees, as opposed to just 2 days.
No, I mean, it's a different philosophy,
Different
right?
mindset.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a different conversation.
If this is Jen Crawford, am I able to speak since I'm not in the audience there?
Mr.
Please
Chairman.
do.
Well, thank you. I brought that up in our department head meeting only because, of our 36 staff, 20 are regular part-time. And when we do have holidays and we're shut down, our part-time folks have to use PTO in order to get paid on those days, where the rest of our staff, we don't have to. We're off with pay, and those part-time who their PTO hours are prorated already based upon the hours that they already work. So it's less than what we would receive, but I understand they work less hours. But on those days, those individuals have to actually use their PTO, their paid time off, in order to get paid for those days. And that has just never felt good to me. And so that's why I brought that up as a recommendation from our department. I know for us, when we talked about it in there, Melissa said we do budget across the entire year for the 52 weeks for the hours that they work. So we're budget for all that time. But I know in other departments, like Jake mentioned at the MRF, it would be an additional cost to his department, where for us, we already budget that. So it would be no increased cost to us.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you.
You add another 11 holidays. Yeah, it could be substantial. I personally would like to know what that financial dollar is, because I count on my part-time employees to work them holidays. So they're getting paid, even though they're having to work them holidays, they're getting paid under that. So where it would become a financial impact, that would become basically double time and a half. They're going to get paid the regular time, and then they're going to get paid time and a half for 12 holiday. So, that's where, right now, I only have one part-time. I have an open position that's a part-time, but that's two people that I have worked them holidays. So, I'd kind of like to have some kind of an idea of financial impact. What that would look like.
Likewise, just as a general statement, would it behoove us to offer that as a potential incentive for new hires to come in and say, hey, if you work holidays, you're getting X, Y, and Z. To me, that sounds like
I think that is huge.
Yeah.
As far as drawing tools to be able
incentivize
to bring employees in or retain, then yeah, that's a major impact. Whether from Jen, for her to be able to have, I think she had like 20 part-time employees. That is a huge job for the county to be able to entice employees on board.
it also sends a very real message about the family.
It's important. I don't want it to make it sound like I'm trying to.
No.
I'd kind of like to have an idea of what the financial impact would be. I think it's a great tool to be able to, for a recruit. It truly is. Because you're offering somebody 13 holidays paid a year instead of 2.
13 and a half.
Okay.
Mhm.
I have one additional comment, just briefly. From our office, there was a comment from a regular part-time employee stating, so looking at that, Christmas Day and New Year's Day, she expressed that even if we could add Thanksgiving Day, that would be massively meaningful to her and her family. So that's potentially an angle to explore as well.
I get back to this idea of whether you're part-time, or whether you're full-time, you're part of the team. You're not less than, just because you work less hours or unable to because you have a family. You're still just as valuable. I don't ever want to devalue somebody just because they work part-time.
Carrie?
I think if we look historically, years and years ago in Isabella County, a part-time employee did receive a benefit of a prorated retirement. And then that was done away with. And you can see that was really when part-time hiring a part-time became a huge problem. We couldn't get because there are no benefits.
Long-term.
The only thing that you receive is those 2 holidays. We had those same 2 holidays back then, but there was that additional benefit, and then when that additional benefit was removed, now all of a sudden, all we have is those, you know, the only thing we have are those 2 holidays, and with pay being what it is, normally those part-time people are the bottom. They're the bottom paid people, and so they're really not being paid at a high rate. And then we're taking a lot of those paydays away from them. And so I think it's, you know, they can go to, you know, Myers or Walmart or wherever and get paid, you know, Subway or wherever, and they can get paid a whole lot more and have better benefits as a part-time person.
I would want to move as close as we could to making everyone on the same playing field, regardless of whether they're full-time or part-time.
So there is a bit of an analysis maybe that needs to happen with this one, though.
Yep.
In addition to the MRF, I know building facilities also has a part-time employee that this would affect. So I do think it's
Parks and
worth.
Recreation, they have people that have to work because that's when they're the busiest during the holidays, and
Yeah.
they may not get
just-
time off, but
And just to add to that, like, I was just thinking about that, like, we have 5 year-round part-time park rangers that were just approved that would have to work those holidays during the summer. So now we're saying, okay, well, you can get holiday, but now our seasonal workers, no, your seasonal workers, so you can't. So I'm not, I guess there's a little bit of a distinction too.
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
can we,
And regardless of how that falls, I think we would have to distinguish between, you know, these part-time seasonals, and then there is that group of permanent part-time
Yeah, we'd have to
employees
make a
in the
distinction.
office and.
Work that out.
Yeah, that would be just a sidebar to the conversation.
so none of these are earth shaking at this point. Can we just delay this for another meeting? And
I would
give you a chance to talk to everybody and see how that's gonna impact.
I would suggest if you're on board with the changes originally discussed before the part-time conversation, that we would go ahead and make changes to the policy for new hires that are full-time.
I'd like to get a
And-
jump on that part.
And moving to, and I guess it'd be new hires that are part-time too, that would still get, if they were hired in November or December, would still get Christmas Day and New Year's Day as it stands. I think if we focus on those changes we talked about initially, then we can continue the discussion about part-time benefits.
Guess my question would be, because we have this meeting today, our next board meeting is next Tuesday, correct? How much pressure would it be to put on you guys? Director Borton, to kind of get this financial analysis together? Would that be a problem by Tuesday where
Yes,
we could actually talk about it during our work session? I would like to move forward on this.
If it's possible, if it's gonna push.
Stress anybody.
Because I know you're still training staff,
A
then we
little
can
bit, yeah.
delay that portion while you get the.
Yeah, that's what I say. I think the immediate at hand, the new hire changes, I think those shouldn't be held up by the other discussion.
Great.
But it'll be aggressive enough to get those changes made with a revised policy for your packet for Friday for Tuesday's
Tuesday.
meeting. But the financial analysis on the part-time is not gonna
Bigger
happen
reach.
before next week, not with where we're at in the budget process.
So should for our next committee meeting for finance and administration.
We will shoot for that.
All right, this is a discussion, so do we need to take action on this?
I think we need to move to,
I think, I know it's just discussion on the
Yeah.
agenda, but I think if you want full board to consider those changes, we're gonna have to wordsmith a motion for you.
I will move that we make a recommendation to the full board on the proposed change of the PTO and holiday schedule and other modifications necessary in the personnel manual, that those be presented at the work session.
support.
Excellent.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Beautiful.
Control.
Thank you.
One, should we follow up with any of this group regarding this? Is there any follow-up that they need? We ended at that conversation about part-timers outside of new hires. Is there any other, I don't know if you want to address, asking if there's any further comment or anything else that they'd like to add to this before we move on,
It'll be on the agenda for your next finance meeting.
right?
Further discussion about it.
So we can add on to that.
We'll try to have a financial analysis done by then, but understand in order to get to the packet for your next committee meeting, it's due the day after your board meeting. So
Mhm.
if we can't have it done by next Tuesday, it's gonna be difficult by next Wednesday as well, but
Okay,
everyone is certainly welcome back and free to speak on the next agenda.
likewise, feel free to reach out to either of us. We're more than open to conversations outside of today. Do you have anything you want to add? Okay.
Excellent. So
Yes, under the new administration, you're allowed to speak to the commissioners. We'll move on then to our next item, which is the fiscal year 2024 recommended budget draft number 3, the update. And you can see that Commissioners wore red today in anticipation of the presentation.
Well, thank you. Mary.
Yeah. Melissa and I are a little more drab.
They've seen the report.
But yes, still in red. I do have a handful. I know there's so many of you here, but if it helps
can
to
hand out.
follow along. Thank you, Commissioner. If it helps, you can certainly follow along.
Oh, you got it. Thank you, Brian.
Oh, look at you, Brian. Of the.
Brian, on top of it. He anticipated a crowd.
That's Brian's got the agenda. I'm gonna walk through the reconciliation from the last time we spoke. So the front page is unchanged. That's what we brought and discussed last time. We've checked and double checked. So some of that checking and double checking has really led to the second page. So first page unchanged, which is what led us to the 2.5 million
Can I make a
deficit.
comment on the first page?
Absolutely.
I was looking at that at home, and it's not a big change, but we have the $2,600 in lieu of for commissioners. Actually, you can throw that on the other side of the ledger, 2,600, because if somebody opts to do that, we're going to save more than that. If it does not get taken up, it'll just be neutral.
So I love the way you think. In terms of in lieu, the way we budget. If someone's not been taking the insurance, we don't budget that they will take the insurance. Is that
I
correct,
don't
Melissa?
anticipate.
So there wouldn't be a
Oh,
saving, there wouldn't be a
okay.
savings there. However, we can jump down to that. Didn't we put that on here, Melissa, to
Page 2.
take it back out? I thought we reversed that back out. Let's see, on
Oh.
page 2.
We were supposed to, yes,
Okay.
'cause we took it out of the first page, but we didn't wanna change what had
So you added it back
originally
in.
came, so we added back in, but it did not, so
Okay, so
off
we
of
might,
that second page, we'll take off the 2,600 pending. Legal counsel.
yeah, so I did reach out to legal about that specific issue, Commissioner Jelzinski. If you recall in our training from legal, a board can never vote themselves a raise, right? The board, Shiawassee County Commissioners recently taught us that in ARPA, right? When they tried to, yep, they voted in themselves a raise.
It has to be done by
Okay,
expiring board.
you got it. You can vote in a raise for the next board, but you can't vote in a raise for yourself. So one savvy commissioner brought that to my attention, and we wondered if that in lieu compensation would actually be considered increasing your salary, right? It is.
It is.
It is in a way, right? So
It is.
we've posed that question to legal. I haven't gotten the response back, but we thought it most prudent. Maybe we better just back that out at this point. If any changes to compensation are made, it probably ought to be made effective
Sure.
for the following fiscal, yeah,
Mhm.
January 1, 20. Good. So now that we've got that discussion talked about, let's go back page 2, so that I'll remember when we left netted out to 2.5, and some of the things we had on this list at that point, we didn't have much dollar amounts. It was really just for further discussion. We started to talk about those things, and then you said, bring us numbers and bring us further discussion. So I'm just going to walk through these changes we came up with that take us essentially down to 1.5 deficit. You can see at the bottom of the page. We talked about delinquent tax revolving fund transfer in. Again, I do think that is still available to the county as a revenue source in the general fund. We know the process, we understand the law, but I would not look to recommend an amount. I would look to our county treasurer for him to recommend any amount that we might be able to build in here. So
Contingent upon recommendation.
yes, I don't know if you can relay that message, Kathleen, but I do think we're not going to spend weeks in an exhaustive review of the cash flow of the fund. We can look back to last March and know. So you guys know the fund better than anyone. So I think we would just look to your recommendation if there is something there.
And as the legal process moves on for people to request repayment, probably need to build that fund up because we know it's going to happen.
It's
And
coming.
Otherwise, it's going to hit our general fund.
That's
Right.
certainly part of their knowledge and understanding, and I think part of their analysis that would happen down there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've talked about solar farm personal property tax revenues, and I left that on here again. Not to build an amount in, not to build a specific amount in for tax revenue. But if we think that is coming, that maybe that just affords the commissioners a little more comfort in using fund balance to balance the budget. The size of solar farm that may be becoming a utility scale solar farm like we're anticipating, maybe would bring in the first year between $750,000 and $1 million of additional personal property tax revenue. If it wasn't completed, if they started it yet this year and wasn't completed by December 31st of 2023, it would still come on the tax roll at 50%. So we would still receive half of that taxable value revenue, if you will.
Okay.
There's an aggressive depreciation on solar, more so than wind, and it depreciates down to 12%. So that's that ongoing, how the turbines they depreciate down to about 30% salvage value. Solar is 12%, so it's even less. So 12% of that initial $750,000 to $1 million is all we can count on for year after year.
Over how many years? I forget what the
Life of the project, those projects are generally 20 to 40 years, I believe.
I
Wind
mean, how
turbines
quickly
are a
does it,
little
how
longer.
quickly does it go down to the 12?
I
I forget what the
don't
schedule
know if
looks
I
like.
have that schedule with me, Commissioner, but I
Sure.
feel like it's over 11 years. In the 12th year, it goes down to 12%. You think I would be able to remember that?
Within 12 years.
Mm.
So
It's
Okay.
pretty aggressive.
12 to 12. 12 years to 12%.
So really those solar revenues, if and when they come, should be considered more for one-time expenses, right? Just like we learned with the turbine, that depreciation, that big number is not always going to be there. Maybe build in the 12% over time, take the cream off the top for the one-time expenses. So I just leave that in there just to continue that conversation, so you know what may be coming.
Okay.
Additional transfer in from commissary fund for vehicle costs. So originally we had transferred in from commissary around $119,000 for the cost of 2 new vehicles and their equipping at the sheriff's department, sheriff's office patrol vehicles. In conversations with the sheriff's office recently, we had that amount incorrect. It was 121,000. So we just needed to add in that additional cost. We added it in below in the expenditures. You see increased vehicle expense. Now we're adding in the revenue to completely cover the cost. So that's really a net zero, if you will, on the budget.
Okay.
Taxable value audit, I left that on here just because we started that conversation last time too. I just want to be clear about what this is or what I think this is. I think this is utilizing our permit system to indicate whether there's been additions or new construction
Taxable value.
exclusively. And there's a equalization has a process for annual field audits of that information. It's like a percentage, right? So I'm just suggesting maybe something more aggressive, that maybe there's taxable value in the county that we don't have on the books. So that's a conversation with equalization. That's training with all of our local assessors just to get on the same page. So it's not a dollar amount, it's a concept.
At the moment, it's a concept.
Mhm.
Now, so what direction would you need from the Board of Commissioners to make something like this happen? Where is there going to be money needed for additional staff, additional training, cost of training?
I think Pete Preston is the one to answer that. I need to find out from him exactly what that takes. Maybe it's just having all the assessors come in and do a training. Maybe it's boots on the ground field work. But I know that Pete Preston's company can handle all of that for us.
So we could do, so you're saying that through Pete, we could probably do all of the above?
I think so.
Just from my perspective, from the district that I represent, there's taxable value there. It's not being captured in a significant way, in my opinion. So I think there's a real opportunity to close this $1.5 million gap. Just in my district alone, let alone yours or anybody else's. So
Maybe.
I think to me, that's my general impression in my tours of my district. So of all the things that we're talking about, this taxable value audit, I feel may give us our biggest bang for our buck long-term, not just short-term for the 3 or 4 years that we're talking about, but long-term.
Going for our village before we go for this, right?
Well, I think
Raise
it's
the
like it's
standard up.
concurrent, right? I think it's concurrent. I think one kind of goes with the other.
I didn't take this job to get reelected.
Clearly. Clearly. So that's the concept. I will follow up with Pete. If there are additional expenses, Pete will bring that forward. So we're eyes wide open, but I bet it's going to be a good return on investment.
Just I'm happy, maybe invite him here. Talk about it. Is
We
that
could.
realistic? Is
We
it
could.
worthwhile or to our advantage?
I'll see where the conversation goes. Maybe it's something I can relay, or maybe we'll need to get him here.
Sounds good. I'd like to pursue this.
Indeed. So going down, that was the exhaustive list of revenues, adjustments to expenditures. We did take another look at the jail bond payment that we built in on the front page. That $1.5 million payment is based on us drawing the entire $41.5 million loan from USDA. We have not done that and will not do that by the time our December and June payments come. I think we'll be about 20 to 25 million drawn this December, 30 to 35 million drawn next June. And so we figured principal and interest based on that. We have reached out to financial advisors at Baker Tilly to make sure our logic is sound.
Numbers are accurate.
Yes, but we do believe that it won't be the $1.5 million bond payment. It'll be more something like
1 million.
closer to 1 million.
Yeah.
So we've taken that much out and we'll tighten that back down after we hear from the financial advisors. County drain at large appropriation, I did leave this on here just to continue the conversation. This is the opportunity we talked about, if the county would pay off, if you will, our portions of all the county drain assessments through time. We have taken out and bonded for that. So every year we're paying principal and interest. So we think about how we might treat our own money. We would maybe not do that to save interest. We would pay a big principal. I've also talked to you about that requiring about $2.8 million out of fund balance to be able to do that. And right now, I can't sit here and recommend that we spend that fund balance on that. We'll continue to look, we'll continue to analyze, but
If we can come up with the money, it makes,
yeah,
Very good,
absolutely.
sound
It would
financial
save about
sense.
$800,000 in interest off of our current drain assessments, if you will.
yearly,
No,
over time.
that over a period of time, over the life of the current
What's the
loans.
interest rate that we're?
Varies based on different drains involved, but I can tell you, if we do it right now, we save the most, right? Because we
Correct.
save the most right now. If we did it this year, we save about $100,000 in this year.
Only because I've cut back on new projects.
Yes.
If I'd have kept going, rolling at the rate Rick and the previous drink, you know, it would probably still be going up. I've cut that out, you know, on the new project. Anyway.
So if we do it now, we save about $100,000 in interest this year. If we did it next year, we'd save about 90. It kind of trends that way. As you imagine, over time, we pay it down, we pay it off.
Depending on how
Most
many
bang for the
projects
buck
it's
is now, over time, is about $800,000 in interest. We just aren't that confident as we sit right here today that, right, that
Yeah,
we'll have
yeah,
the cash
it's
flow for
cash
the
flow
other
issue
things.
that we have.
Yeah.
If we can figure out another way to increase cash flow.
Yes, then we can start to do smart things like that with our money.
Gotta be-
Yes.
So are we at a point with that cash flow that we need to start budgeting money for interest to make a loan to keep it solvent?
No.
Until our
Not as we sit today. It's that the sheriff's office and correctional facility project and the cash flow needed for that I think will dictate. Because we're over budget and we need more than the $41.5 million USDA loan. And we're closing the gap on being over budget, over schedule on that program, on that project, but I think we're so far from the end. We know more changes are coming. We know more change orders are coming, so
For sure.
we can't have a half-done jail or a partial done jail. Well, that's a priority for cash flow right now.
Has to get done. Well, one more question about adjustments to revenue. I know we had the $250,000 loan to the drains. Is that
Yeah.
something that should be just added to this, just as a point of reference to revisit over time?
Yeah,
And
I
have
think it can be,
conversations
I
with the
think it
drain
can be
commissioner.
revisited, to Drain Commissioner Willoughby's point, if he's doing, well, no, that doesn't have anything to do with your projects, does it? Because that's your ongoing maintenance revolving.
Previous, you know, the last 20 years, there's been some monster size projects,
Yes.
and
That's where the money's going.
we don't need them now. Well, I mean, it was a great thing, they got them done, that they probably should have even been done earlier than that, but, you know, we're going back down on, the drains we're working on now are small drains. Goes on this big long drain, you know, for a while.
Right.
Like expectancy. We're working on smaller drains, smaller projects. That's all it is. I'm not patting myself on the back for anything. It's just, that's the way it is.
Okay. So we might go get a $250,000 back. Later.
Yeah, so, yes, Drain Commissioner Willoughby, can you speak to the additional $250,000 that was given towards revolving, if you're doing smaller projects, why that is going up and necessary then?
Well, I'm doing a lot more maintenance. That basically is my maintenance balance. That's not my project. Projects have nothing to do with that. That's my maintenance balance.
At some point in time, we get to where maintenance, we've got them all maintained. I mean, there's an end in sight at some point. And I mean, hypothetically,
It's up now, right?
No, it's job security for the drain office.
I mean,
Nature
dictates that, but
A lot of these drains are over 100 years old, so.
most of them. Yeah.
So they still go fix one spot, and might have to fix another spot next year.
Basically, just so you know, this board, what the, under maintenance, I can only maintain, I cannot improve the drain whatsoever. So if we're gonna do, make a bigger drain or make the ditch bigger or deeper or anything like that, it has to be a sufficient project. That's where you get that humongous 20-year finance sustenance, at large sustenance. Under maintenance, it's year to year. I work on a drain, so many dollars worth of work on the drain.
Yeah, right.
Here. And that's, and don't get me wrong, the county they're on every roll too, at large, but it's, significantly smaller. And, it's a lot smaller number.
To your point, though, we'll make note of that and
it should be put on there.
certainly,
Maybe not even this year, next year or something.
sure,
Should be able to get that money back
that's why it was,
loaned.
yes, that's why it was. When it was done.
And when that does come back, I know you had mentioned, well, that could help with this 1.4, but keep in mind that was cash loaned due from, I believe, I don't believe it. We didn't hit an expense when we transferred that to them. It never was an expense. It's just, we would get the cash back, which we do need.
Fund balance.
Cash, yes,
Exactly.
but it wouldn't affect the
Right, right.
revenue. It wouldn't be revenue back to us
Right.
because it never
So
was.
it
an
wouldn't affect
expense.
this, it would just help with fund balance.
With fund balance and cash.
In terms of
cash flow.
solvency, cash flow.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd
solvency
give you
mechanism.
more comfort to say, let's use 1.5 million in fund balance.
And that's kind of where I'm at.
Right.
But it'd still be $1.5 million.
Yes.
Mhm.
Good point. Thank you for that. Okay, so moving on, let's see, facilities additional capital expenditure allowance budgeted at 150,000. So I remember last time we had the talk about where our culture is going budget wise. And that this board had said, build in a 2.5% increase for wages, build in $250,000 for facilities for unexpected capital expenses, right? And so as a culture, we decided that's what we were going to do. The last time I brought forward, we could remove that. That doesn't feel good, right? It looks like making a promise and then going back on it right away. But we could do something in between. So this is just recommending that we reduce that 100,000 and we still budgeting 150,000 for those extras, but maybe 250 is just too aggressive where we stand right now, but it's still a step in the right, it's still a step in the right direction.
Like, I won't argue that, but is 150 gonna work versus 250,
What's gonna break?
Yeah, I mean,
given where
it
we're
takes
going?
money to fix these things. If we don't have the money, eventually it's gonna catch up to us as it is already, because we haven't had it over the years.
Right. So here's my, with the, moving forward with Johnson Controls and updating the majority of what we use around here. Couldn't there possibly be savings involved where there wouldn't be as much R and M involved with these pieces of
Well,
equipment?
definitely.
So
Until we meet with them tomorrow, we won't know exactly what that is.
that's on my list of things to talk about is how can this will this, I mean, it should, right? It should
should.
positively impact R and M.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to know to what extent.
I mean, we shouldn't spend as much money taking care of a brand new jail as we have this old dilapidated one, but there's, we're gonna keep that.
Correct. Well, believe me, I don't know how
We
that
should.
works. Okay. There should be.
There should be.
I know.
Good conversation.
Thank you, sir.
The next one is reduce equipment repair and maintenance and corrections. This was actually a duplicate expense and this came from us, diving into the budget, looking at every line and saying, what is that for? We had duplicated the expense for the sheriff's cars for his request, so it's actually a good thing. So it was budgeted at 121 in the equipment repair and maintenance line, 121.90, I believe. And so that line originally had $9,000 in it, so that's why we're only reducing it to 112 to leave the 9 in there to be used for equipment repair and maintenance. So that was a really great find. The next one is just increasing expenditures by that 1330 that we talked about to get the vehicles right. This next one is these next two, the 17,000 down. You can see those net out to zero, and let me explain the budget magic that we go through to make this happen. So initially, drains had requested a new truck, facilities had requested a new truck. When I came to you early on, I suggested those two departments don't need the vehicles full time. So let's take out one of the requests and request that they share the truck. Since then, facilities has deferred to drains because, and basically said, if there can only be one, I'll defer and allow, the drains request, I'll basically take my request out. Drains were needing to get to the Lake Isabella water supply inconsistently, right? They don't know when they need to go, so they felt like sharing a truck was maybe not ideal for them. So I go back here. We had in the budget, I think 30,500 that we had reduced to say for drains request. But their request for a vehicle is actually a little more than that. And I know, Tim, you sent very recent information that is not part of this discussion. So the numbers are going to be a little skewed, but bear with me. Drains original request for 30 or even 35,000 for a truck included a trade-in value of the initial one, right? That's the existing one we talked about. There's still being life in that 2014, I believe, low miles. So trade-in is still possible. And I want to say the value was 17 for a trade-in. So logic says perhaps drains could give facilities the 2014 rather than trading it in, right? So what we have to do then is increase the amount of money that drains would spend on a truck in the budget because there's no trade-in. So we increase their amount that they're going to spend by 17,000. Where does that come from? Comes from facilities budget, and we decreased a couple of line items for ground maintenance and snow removal. We looked at trend. One of the highest years we had for grounds maintenance and snow removal is because we double billed. Remember, we had a vendor invoice late, and so we did have one year where there was a lot spent for snow removal, but we believe it's because of that double year. So yes. So we did decrease it from those budgets. So it's a net zero on the budget. It gives facilities something a lot more reliable than, a lot more reliable than they have. And it still is moving forward with a new drain vehicle.
These guys are good with this? You guys are good with
This is
this?
the first they're hearing about
Oh,
that. This was
first, I
a
mean.
brainchild from yesterday.
Oh,
So
it
I know
sounds
that
like a win.
Director Shoemaker was willing to give up his request and defer to the drains. I would assume drains is okay with giving a truck to another department instead of trading it in, as long as they would have enough money still to get the truck. That's where it stands right now. Phew, thanks for sitting through that. That's kind of like that budget magickery that you go, okay, we do this, it takes a lot, but thanks for hanging in there. So the next thing is MMRMA RAP grants or risk avoidance program grants. So MMRMA, remember, is Michigan Municipal Risk Management Authority, our property and liability insurance carrier. So last year at budget time, we pushed the sheriff to apply for a RAP grant for some inmate software he was getting through capital expense. I just leave this on the list to have that conversation and remind any departments. I recently sent a link out to you guys of the RAP manual. They have standing grants that, you know, generally if you apply, you do get funded. So I've just sent that list out to the departments. So I'd just like to remind you to look at that list and see if there's anything you're getting that it can cover. Parks comes to mind. They have a standing grant for fire rings. If you're ever putting in fire rings, they'll generally always pay up to 50% up to a certain amount. So there, just please take a look at that.
And those are matching grants, right? 50/50.
Generally, yes.
So that's why you're keeping it as expense.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Yes. Maybe it can serve to lower the expense of something
That's
already
being
budgeted.
for.
I'm not asking you to go look for new projects, right? But something existing project, could there be some help for funding? It's not open only to sheriff, and I think that's the story.
Open to other departments.
Yes. Yes. The next one is fiscal year 24 healthcare costs. I'm glad to see a negative number here. As I reported last time, we met with 44 North, I think the day following or maybe that afternoon of finance. And we found we had a 9% increase to our healthcare costs. But one thing, Melissa's so diligent in building into a requested budget, a 10% increase in healthcare costs. That's what healthcare costs do.
You talked about that, didn't you?
Yeah, so this
Under
would,
promise and over deliver.
yes, yeah, you have to, I can't come with my hat in my hand and say, oh, I'm sorry, commissioners, you know, that $1 million deficit we thought we had is now
now.
1.5 because of the increase.
Better go this way.
Yes, absolutely.
Is our self-insurance for pharmacy, medical, is that still serving us well? And is the committee still looking at self-insurance for a regular Blue Cross Blue Shield?
The committee is looking at everything. This renewal at 9% is an as-is renewal, so it would be going forward fully insured with Blue Cross Blue Shield and self-insured with prescriptions. Because you asked, I will update you on how our self-insured for prescriptions is going this year. We were trending to save about $100,000. We are no longer on that trend. Part of it had to do with paying for injectable weight loss medicine that is generally prescribed for diabetics, but was now being prescribed for weight loss. When we did the analysis of self-funded for prescriptions, we had 2 employees on those medications. After the commercials started to come out about that these were not just for diabetes, you could lose weight on these drugs, we went to 15 employees on these injectables. Other prescription carriers, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, the big carriers, industry standard is they went to disallowing coverage for these drugs for weight loss. If you medically need the drug for diabetes or another medical condition, absolutely covered, you're able to get that medication. So I chose to go with what other carriers were doing since we're self-insured for prescriptions. This is a county decision. And I said, let's follow suit and no longer cover those. So in the law allows for, you give employees 60 days to find an alternative or to work through the process. And again, anyone medically necessary to receive the medicine is still going to receive them. But we took a big hit on our costs because of that. We did alter the practice. So we're in that 60-day period still right now, but going forward, we should see those costs more controlled. I think we're on track more to be 100,000 over than under. I will say Lisa Hoppy from 44 North did mention, remember, medical care facility is married to what we do. And they went self-insured for prescriptions and are still on track to save, I think, a couple $100,000, 100 to 200,000. So it is working well for them, and we will get back on track with it. So all of that said, I will say that the insurance committee is exploring other options. They are exploring what does self-insurance look like and how long might it take to get there? What are our best options for third-party administrators? There is still a chance that we could make changes to save even more from this 230,000 that's represented here.
Under promise, hopefully may be able to over deliver.
Yes, yeah, we're not looking to incorporate any of those numbers into this.
Just yet.
We've asked for more detailed data so that the insurance committee can analyze it. So more to come on that, but the good news is we get to have a negative number here and
Sure.
because we built in a 10% increase. Great questions. Thanks for the sidebar. Obviously, a lot
Thank you.
going on with healthcare right now.
Thank you to me, Doc.
I would like to point out too, I know that 200, when anyone looks at healthcare costs reducing $230,000, how did the county say, how are we able to save that? What does that look like for employees or anything else? That is no change to employee cost shares, any coverage. That's an as is renewal, because I know that's, especially in the insurance committee, that's been floating around. Does that mean our cost shares went up for a family, single and 2-person, or what? That is everything staying the same as it currently is.
Chairman, I know at the staff meeting, they went to county administrator. I want to reiterate my apology to the folks who do work for Isabella County. I think we have dropped the ball as a board of commissioners in terms of relaying our efforts to get out ahead of our deficit that we're facing down the road. And I think we've done a poor job of communicating to them that we're not going to ask them to carry the burden. I don't think they should have to carry mistakes of past administrations when it comes to, especially when it comes to insurance. And I've personally assured everyone that was at that staff meeting that my ultimate goal is better service for less money and still be able to save the county money. The priority one is better service, better coverage at a lower cost will be paramount over saving the county money. So I wanted to make sure that that message was conveyed, at least from me. But I think we as a board of commissioners should convey that to everyone who does work for Isabella County, because
I think that's been conveyed by the board, that we want to continue to support an excellent healthcare program. It's one of our pillars of attracting a good workforce. And I think that's been said by other commissioners too.
And we need to continue that because it was brought up during that meeting with the staff that there's some concerns amongst the team here at the county level that maybe that's not our priority. So I think we just need to continue to present that message. And that's why I wanted to bring it up today. So I'm glad you appreciate that as well. So I think the two of us are on the same page when it comes to taking care of the people who do work for.
And I think the whole board is on that same.
I think so
page.
too. I think we all need to say that. Great. Okay.
Excellent. These next couple are just a result of going back through, looking at each fund to see, is there a healthy fund balance in the funds that we appropriate general fund dollars to? Is there room maybe to reduce our appropriation to those funds? And so we're saying we can reduce the appropriation to law library by 2,000 and to friend of the court by 20,000 because of those healthy fund balances. Same can be said for the commissary, right? Went back and looked at that to make sure It can
Mhm.
handle the vehicles, it can handle the additional repair and maintenance costs, it can handle it, still keep operating. This next one this is tough, and I know it's why a lot of you have joined the meeting today to see what's happening with personnel requests. The only personnel requests going forward at this time, in my recommendation, the requests that have to do with the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission's Standard 8 and raising salaries as essentially an unfunded mandate from the state for our public defender's office. And that has to equate to increasing attorneys' salaries and wages in the prosecuting attorney's office and at our trial court. We cannot have, we can't set one attorney's salary in a certain department at a different level than another department. And that's what becomes that unfunded mandate part, but we are beholden to that. The other requests that we're kind of changing and moving forward, you'll see that next bullet point is reducing a transition period for a new IT director. IT Director Michelle Ray has announced she will be retiring end of next calendar year. At a certain point in next fiscal year, her request was to bring on I think an interim deputy IT director. I get the concept. We want someone to train under Michelle. She's been here since the 80s. Right, and she holds a ton of institutional knowledge, and she needs to begin that process of transferring that knowledge. It's not as cut and dry as that, obviously, because who's it going to be, right? And an interim may go back to their position. So I don't know if that's necessarily what we want to do too. We're not creating a deputy IT director position, so that's not the appropriate thing either. It really is a transitional IT director that would not be at Michelle's wage, but a lesser wage, but I think we figured a grade 14 for that. Someone who we would, I believe, as we discussed, actually we would post the position, interview and hire, knowing it's going to be someday our IT director, but at first you're going to serve in this transitionary period. So whether that's internal staff that applies for that or not, that's kind of like the what we're thinking as the structure moving forward. It's not a new deputy position. It'd actually be transitioning and a sorts of interim transitioning. And now the request was for, we figured that for all year long, and it's not something that's necessary all year long. I do want to say though, that, so I think these numbers suggest 6 or 7 months, like 7 months at this. So there is a reduction because of that, the other 5 months. I do want to say it is Director Ray's intent that in this time next year, when we're looking at the 25 budget, to build in another, like a third IT position, right? So it would be a director and 2 techs. So wherever we're at in that transitionary, that may or may not mean 1 or, maybe 2 if it's internal. We don't know exactly, but I do want to set that stage that this plan is moving toward ultimately having an IT director and 2 techs in that.
So in terms of cost, as opposed to one IT director. And a little lower for a new IT director and 2 techs. So the extra cost, the county could be kept to a minimum or
Yes,
essentially, okay.
yes.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Just lost our audio for some reason. Not sure why that happens, but let me get us back on.
Are you on YouTube?
Okay, awesome. Thank you for checking.
Yeah.
I don't know why we lost it, but we're back on. Okay, so that was the IT discussion. Other reclassification requests, and part of why this is hard is these folks have been waiting a long time. The same departments, specifically thinking of drains, facilities and materials recovery facility and register of deeds, certainly Parks and Rec. Again, I think that's probably why you're here. Thank you for your patience. While I thought we could internally do a wage study with the tool granted to us through the last wage study. Director Borton and I worked through with admin staff through the job evaluation manuals to see if in-house we could come up with grades and figure this out. But it really, I think what I said is it can't be done without icky manipulation. It just was, it's really tough. I know it was tough for the admin staff at the time to be looking at colleagues' duties and saying, you know, determining where those lie. It's a wage study is a profession, right? People can go into this field professionally, and there's a reason why we go outside for those services. So as I sat here a year ago, my recommendation is still to do a wage study. We still have money built in the current year's budget for a wage study, which probably will not happen in the course of the next couple of months. But the one silver lining that I can report is that our brand new payroll clerk, Steve Pryor, has been spending, I think, the last 2 solid weeks responding to a wage study for Shiawassee and Hillsdale counties. This is a wage study that's being performed by Mark Notley from a company we know as William Rye. They are the ones that did our study prior to the Seagull Water study. I think that was probably in the 90s. It was a while ago. But they're the professionals, and up until Seagull Waters, who the county sent reclassification requests out to. Normally when these come through, hopefully in conjunction with the budget, the county would send it out. The William Rye would they knew our structure, they would score it according to our structure, and they would come back with a recommendation that position be at this level. Then the board would consider that, right? It would still be the board making a change to a grade, probably in conjunction with the annual budget. Ever since the Seagull Water study, we've not been able to send those out for a third-party administrator. We reached out to William Rye early last year, and he was not willing to interject his opinion in our current structure. So what we hope to gain from the wage study that we've just responded to, I believe it has a total of 12 other counties involved with it other than us. We will receive all the data from those counties, and they will be some of our comparables. So I reached out to Mr. Notley to say, well, does that position us better? Does that give us a jump start on a wage study here? Certainly it gives us all the current market data among several comparable counties, not CMU, not
local,
the
but
tri, yeah, not the
just
top.
county.
Yes, not the
County
suit,
level.
but other comparable counties, and these would be comparable regarding like taxable value, comparable population. So what I was told by Mark Notley, the studies were due yesterday. They said, let me compile the results. Once you get those results, let's meet and talk about if that furthers Isabella County positions us better to go forward with the study. Maybe it'll be cheaper, maybe they'll, they've already got at least that much information. We aren't sitting here at ground zero, I don't feel like.
It's tough for the departments that have asked for the studies and they're having to wait, at least some additional weight. But I think it is the right way to go, just to make sure we have balance throughout all of our departments and pay grades.
And we're at the same level within the silos of the county.
Yes, yes. So the market piece will be done for them and perhaps a study of our structure can be,
You go along a little quicker.
yes, maybe cheaper.
Quicker and cheaper.
Mm.
Okay.
So I will let you know as soon as I hear back from him, but this, it's about $80,000 represents the amount of removing those personnel requests from the budget, because remember, we build them all into the original requested budget.
Okay.
Details of that are the other attachment that I think I handed out.
Okay.
Oh, because I want you to understand who those departments are. They're all here. The ones highlighted are the standard 8 attorney wages and then the transitional IT director. I suppose, don't swat me. This is going the wrong way in the budget, but obviously this is something that, again, I'm not proud of where we're at. I'm not proud that we haven't made any advancement on these positions. And I think if we look back, I think all of these probably were identical last year, at least in the, maybe not the amount, but at least identical in the position that was requested for reclassification. So I don't want to make any promises, but if the board was so inclined, because these have been repeat requests, we could look at retroactivity if and when something changes for those positions.
Yeah, because the onus falls on us.
And more so
Again,
in this regard.
we're asking them to carry the burden of us not making this happen in a timely fashion. So I think we have some accountability and responsibility here that we should own up to.
And that's what I'm saying, if it's deemed that, yes, some of these change, maybe then at that time we look at interjecting retroactivity.
Understand there's a cost to that, but still, to me, it's the right thing to do. Again, kicking the can down the road, it's not my thing,
Mhm.
you know?
And it's a can I inherited and a can
I know.
I continued to kick. So there's definitely culpability on my part here. I did request and everyone granted me the grace to try and figure this out in-house. Can't we save the money? Gosh, we have the tool. It just doesn't work. And there's a reason why we send these things out to third-party administrators. So, yes.
Objectivity is very important in this regard. So,
I
because anything else
that's why I
less than
mentioned it.
outside is very subjective. I don't like that at all either.
Yeah, we do have options that we can look at going retroactive. But what we don't want to do is wait 3 or 4 years like we did with the last study to take some kind of action.
So do we make a recommendation as to a timetable? Is that
I think,
considering?
well, I think as soon as I hear back from Mark Notley, I'll know what's possible as far as a timetable.
When you hear from him?
Like I said, survey results for that wage study were due yesterday to him. 30 pages of positions and questions from each of the 13, I believe, total counties. So that, you know, as quick as he can assemble that information, compile it and get it out to us.
So by our next committee meeting,
I don't know how quick he operates. We'll find out.
just make that a tentative kind of thing, and try to have it done by then. Because that, you know, man, I want to get on top of this.
So hopefully if he's got us the information, then it sounds like after that, he's willing to entertain a conversation with us about how that information, once compiled and we understand it, can help us move forward more quickly, the wage side.
Quickly, I like that word. Expeditious. I think this,
We should have left the third page that was kind of blank on here for their idea. The last thing you'll see on that list is the budgeted 2.5% wage increase that would save, if, notice that we did not back that out or recommend backing it out. But in terms of general fund, it would save just about $275,000.
if we,
Backed it out entirely, so you can kind of do the math from there. 1% is gonna, a 1% increase costs about $110,000 to general fund.
I'm thinking we need to stick at the 2.5%. I serve as a advisor in another financial committee and I'm not going to disclose the percentage that another group of employers is providing to keep up with inflation, but I think that's modest.
you know, I've mentioned before, I feel it should be 3, but I understand our financial situation. You know, I'm keenly aware. But the thing is again, I feel like over time, I think we need to catch up a little. So that's my position has been 3%. So I understand 2.5, kind of where we sit, but I know for me, it's minimum 3.
And all this is in the big picture as we're trying to maintain a sustainable budget over a period of time that we know in a couple of years, we're going to have a very difficult time without new revenues maintaining. So we gotta do the best we can with what we have.
You know me, we'll never be able to maintain this sustainability without. Because you can't do any of their things and I can't do what they do. So I feel like.
I can do Parks and Recreation.
Oh, you.
I could.
Whether he can or whether he can't, I don't know. Man, you saw all that.
I just got
You just-
slammed.
Man.
I can still have a sign site, right?
I still have that sign.
So,
All right.
Okay, so all told, that's cutting another million, so still in the red. You guys called that right. About 1.5 million now.
I still think with that taxable value audit, while I might not bring it in quickly, boy, that's something that could make an impact, some kind of impact on that 1.5, even if it was to 500,000, just a
And it-
small amount.
And it really does impact it, as long as those changes would hit the taxable value by December 31st of this year,
Right,
then that's the amount that we would levy our 6.61 mils on July 1st of 24
So if we want to have some kind of impact for that fiscal year,
before year end.
we've got 5 months,
Yes,
which creates a sense of urgency
yes,
in my world.
yes.
And I feel bad missing the Middle Michigan Development Corporation meeting this morning. I was hoping to get some update on the solar farm up in Isabella Township. But maybe I'll stop in to see if Jim McBride had anything on the agenda dealing with that.
And give us an update. That'd be good.
So we can incorporate these things into the numbers and obviously we'll bring another draft to the next finance. That'll be the final draft. August 8th finance before the first meeting in September is the public hearing. And we'll
Yes,
have to
sir.
have, the budget, out there for public consumption 10 days prior. So unless you guys have additional ideas to build in for revenues or expenditures, your final adopted budget is gonna look like using 1.5 million of fund balance to adopt it.
See where we're at right now, this week come up with some more between now and the 8th.
Which isn't too bad when you consider we really started about 5.5.
Now, just to come back away a little bit, 30,000 foot view. With this process, before I got here, was this a process that was normally done? Or we sit down, and have conversations with department heads and have this, different drafts and different conversations about where is it, it seems like this doesn't seem like it's been something that's happened in the past, because you wouldn't be where you're at now or where we're headed if we had these kind of fruitful conversations. I don't know.
I don't think they were as in depth prior to you. It was a full year of you, but prior administration. I don't believe like this, not this. Not 3 drafts, 4 drafts to finance.
Not this in depth, not this inclusive of the people who are involved in creating these numbers. In terms of the
Yeah,
staff and-
or, I think the time frame is important too. We've stretched out the time frame to prepare the budget document, stretched out the time frame for the public hearing and the adoption in case there would be changes. So kind of similar process, but definitely more discussion and more time to have the discussion. So there is time for feedback if everybody's not okay with it.
Right. So again, by stretching it out, we're allowing ourselves to be more prudent in how we're spending our money and with that, and trying to get to the point where we're as accurate as we can be. I realize it's the best guess, but trying to get as accurate as we can.
Yeah.
All right.
Trying to get as accurate as we can. I know we analyzed prior budgets, in this process too, and last year we had $2 million of unspent expenditures, right? And you think, well, can't we cut something and budget for that? We know that the departments are diligent. We know they're gonna have leftover. But when you analyze that, a lot of it was in lapsed wages, right? Just from vacant positions. I'm not about to recommend on this sheet that we cut any department or hope that they have lapsed wages to cover. So I think
That's a
again,
one-off.
that just goes back to giving you the comfort to use fund balance, because it won't be 1.5 million of fund balance. I wish I'd have thought to bring the page you put together, Melissa. Here's how much fund balance we've used in the past. Here's how much we budgeted to use, and here's how much we end up using. Traditionally, it's a lot less. Those budget amendments we do throughout the year, we tighten that down. We try to budget conservative so that when good news comes throughout the year, we can lower the amount that we've budgeted to use from fund balance. And in some years, actually end up adding to fund balance when we had budgeted to use it.
Like under promise, over deliver.
So
Quick question for you. How comfortable are you with this process that we're going through?
I think it's a great process. I sat, in a work session one time when the budget was presented out in front of us and had some very significant changes in costs, and we didn't have time to even discuss it. I won't bring up
Don't
what it
don't really
was,
bring it up.
but I think this is really a way that we're engaging our employees, we're engaging our county board, and so there's not gonna be any surprises. We know that's some difficult times ahead, and we all know that, working towards that final solution.
So again, I want to say thank you to you for creating the process. 1, 2, allowing for this process to be transparent. You could all do this behind closed doors, I guess, to a certain extent. But I like the fact that it's transparent, not only for me being a new guy, but for our constituents and for these folks. So we're not surprised. Nothing worse than a surprise that's, I'm not a fan of surprises. So I like the idea of being an open forum and being very transparent as best we can about
mhm.
what we're looking at and what we're trying to do. So again, thank you for that. Thank you, Ida.
So we'll move this then for discussion, not for discussion, but for presentation at board meeting. The next item is the invoice list discussion. We got two lists. First one is July 14th. I don't see anything on there. I see we have a drain project. Is it maintenance? Couple of drain projects, but
Near Bass Lake.
are you allowed to spend what, $5,000 on maintenance on each drain or on a, is it a portion of the drain per mile? Okay. Cause I saw that it's like 20,222 on the Weber and Mills drain. But those things are moving forward. I don't have any questions on those bills or any of them in the,
No, put in the packet.
In the
It's,
packet.
Usual customary expenses.
on July 21st. Take a look at those for a minute.
There's the skid loader.
I see we have another foreclosure sale proceeds going out,
Mm,
payment number 2. And what is the set parcel pay that's being made to Chippewa Township and Union Township? It's 2023 set parcel pay.
It's probably, $2.50 they get per parcel. Each
Yeah,
township, city township
treasurers.
treasurers, They get $2.50 a parcel for collection capacity in summer.
Okay,
State
We pay that based on the SPP
Oh.
to us.
and then you send it on to them.
I learned something.
Yeah, okay.
I learned something, but I may ask another question in the future.
You know,
You do?
yeah, never heard of that one before. Okay.
I see, we're gonna have a well replaced at Herrick Recreation Area. Is that the one for the bathhouse and the campground?
No, it's the one on the north side, so the bathroom on the north side and then the pavilions on the north side, we had to replace that, well.
Do you have any questions, Commissioner Humphrey?
No, sir. These are, yeah, pretty straightforward, sir.
Then we'll move these on for the presentation at the next work session. Get down to announcements. Any announcements? None, we'll call to the public again.
I
Karen?
have a couple of questions to ask for clarity. So are you moving forward on the 2.5 wage increase in what you're recommending?
Yes.
And of the 2.5 increase, what percent or percentage of a percent would that cover that approximately 80% of the reclassification for the personnel request? And the reason that I'm asking is not that anybody wants to make less or to be recommended for less, but one of the problems that we've had in the past and that plagued us for a long time when we went into the wage classification in the first place, and we waited forever, is every time you give an increase and you have somebody that's set at an unfair wage, that disparity continues to increase. And we have, I know, especially in the drain office, we have some that have waited for that chance to get at a level playing field. And so every time we give everybody a percentage or whatever it is of an increase, that percentage goes across the board. And so if you're already lower than you should be paid, you're kind of developing a further gap between you and where you should be. And so I think that that is, in a lot of ways, it ruins our whole theory of that whole family unification. And we want to try to be unified. And if we want to be a family, maybe we should look at what is that point of that 2.5% that would cover that 80,000 that we're saying we need to bump those people up to where they fairly should be, so that everybody is equal. We're not saying that, we're just saying, let's put those people up to where they should be, so that when we give a raise, everybody is receiving that wage at an equal playing field.
The problem we have is we don't know what the disparity is, and that's why we're going to an outside third party to help determine that for us. And if we take unilateral action right now to favor some employees at the expense of other employees, I think that's what we're trying to stay away from. I think the best we can do is try to be even and fair at this point as we do an inflationary increase. If there is disparity, it's going to show in the wage study, and eventually we'll correct that. But I don't think we can do that until that wage study is done to make those adjustments, to be fair to everybody.
Right, to be objective.
Yes.
To be objective.
So the question that I would have on that, and to kind of piggyback on what Karen is asking or saying, is that, I think the original wage study that was done it was actually done, 5 or 7 years ago,
2016,
in 2016.
April of
It was
2016.
implemented 4 or 5 years ago. You had certain areas in that wage study that was completely ignored. Okay. So what Karen is saying is that now, and what you're telling us is that you're going to continue to disparage against them particular ones that were not addressed in that wage study, because there was certain areas that was not addressed. That's the reason why we continue to put in for step increases. So what you're going to do is you're going to continue to open that gap up and not looking at that. So the people that were ignored in the last wage study, and I think if you looked at it all the way across, there was going to be like 3, maybe 4 departments that there was very little or no wage increases. My department got 1 wage increase. Okay, and I'm not even going to go into the discussion of why that was given, because there was reasoning behind 1 increase. But I think what you're going to continue to find is that you're going to continue to widen that gap until you get to that next wage study. And I'll guarantee you that I will go back and let my employees know today that there is not going to be any recommendation on step increases. And I had a conversation this morning with one of my employees that's already guaranteed me that they will be sending resumes. I expect that I will have, I know I have 1 that's going to be retiring. And it's a part-time employee at the end of the year. But I expect that there is the possibility that I could have 2 to 3 more people that's waiting on the step increase that will be handing in a 2-week notice that they're going to be looking for employment elsewhere, because they're already at a disparaged wage right now, and where they're at the top of the scale at $18 an hour, they could go somewhere else at $21 and $22 an hour. So they're $4 or $5 an hour below what wage scale is for somebody with a CDL driver classification. So, I will be very forward in letting them know that it's not going to be moved forward. I know that every one of my employees at a minimum could go somewhere else for at least $4 or $5 an hour. And that's almost immediately. So if it can't be recommended moving forward, I'm going to be down to that's for very soon. But that's just, and I understand where we're at financially as a county. Like I said, I also know that there was areas in the last wage study that was.
Now, can I ask a quick question?
Nicole, you had your hand up first.
Yeah.
I did, so I just hope, Jake, that you work on your messaging before you take that forward, because and understand the budget process. It doesn't mean that a recommendation is not going forward. It's not going forward in my recommendation right now. But the process is, there's still more recommendations to come. The process is, the public hearing where employees would have absolutely an opportunity there to come and speak. The process is the board can change anything, you know, from that to the adopted budget. The process right now, I hope that you relay also what we heard this morning was that the next wage study process is underway. We've responded to a current one. We will use that market data going forward and hopefully build on that. So we've also heard whispers of retroactivity this morning. We haven't talked about that before. You've heard these commissioners understand that they respect the ask has continued through the years, and so there's some respect for that. So I hope your messaging to the employees includes all of that as well, other than it's not getting recommended, because we're not even to that point yet. It's not recommended today.
You know,
Okay, please,
to understand that.
Yeah.
good.
But the messaging is still gonna, you know, I mean.
Well, that's
it's a
your
matter
decision
the
of how that
matter-
messaging is delivered.
Yeah, and believe me, that will all be included into it. But I think it still comes back to, you know, again, I think where my employees are gonna see it is that, okay, we're gonna get strung along again. I just still not gonna.
Well, I would hope that you can refer to this recording if you need to pull out those other positive points.
And I think to your point, very important, I hope you understand from my perspective. I have no intention of kicking the can down. That's why I talked about getting immediate responses to things so we can move this thing forward. I want people to see that I'm moving forward as best I can as commissioner. And I know, I think I speak for the chair here that we're not gonna let this sit and fester. Okay, not from my point, because I've been in that situation in my career. So I don't want you guys to be in that situation. So again, I hope you'll convey that. And for those that hang around, I can almost guarantee you that they'll be taken care of. We'll figure out a way. So I'm not gonna let this continue. I mean, if that past work study was such a fiasco that we're put in this position. Again, I'm sorry for that past wage study. I wasn't here for that, but I can tell you this, moving forward, I want to make sure that things are done right. Okay, but I'm not gonna, I won't tolerate that kind of stuff.
So to that point, when we're relaying this messaging to staff, what is the responsiveness gonna look like? Is this gonna be, okay, we did the wage study, now when we are budgeting for next fiscal year, we're gonna use that? Or could this be happening throughout the current fiscal year, effective immediately once we've gotten the data that you're needing?
It could absolutely be incorporated throughout the year. The board would just have to consider budget amendments to make it happen throughout the year if it's not available for consideration at budget time.
So is the goal sooner, more immediate action?
As far as I'm concerned, I mean, again, we've had this work, I hope people will understand. Coming onto this board and understanding how financial can get kicked down the road and county employees were asked to bear the burden willingly, unwillingly, most probably unwillingly, okay? I want to fix that as quickly as possible. That doesn't work for me at all. I've been in that situation. I do not want to put anyone else in that situation. So I will do everything in my power to make this right. So I hope people understand that. We'll try to move this along as well as we can. Believe me, I come from a background, we're fixing this yesterday. Well, it doesn't kind of work that way. Government, it takes a little longer. It's gonna take some time. And I realize you've been told that before, but I'll stick my neck out big time for this one. We'll figure out a way. And I'm hoping that the chair concurs. And we'll try to figure out a way.
We control this committee now, right?
Sure do. So.
Steve?
I want to make a point I think needs to be clarified of what we talked about. We talked about just comparing county to county. If you're talking about retaining, you're competing with everybody. You're competing with Central, you're competing with the cities. You're competing with everybody to retain their employees.
Can't
So
lose
they
sight of
should
that.
just be county because that's not where you're not just competing with other counties. And then one other question I have, either one of you on the committee commissioners, do you actually see the justification of these wage increases or just they want to do this, they want to get paid this?
No, I understand the justification. But that's why I stick my neck out.
I've gone through a couple of these wage studies. I know it's up really a strong point is the department heads have to be able to speak out to make sure that all their positions are fully understood by the people conducting the study. But, you know, if you've got a timid department head doesn't speak out, you're probably not gonna fare very well.
Yep.
And I think we went through that the last time, and department heads did speak up as much as we could.
Understood.
And some of us were discriminated against because in my case, there were several counties that were excluded because they were clerk registers, and that whoever the county administrator was responded that they did not have a register of deeds in their county. The tribe responded that they did not have a register of deeds office. I brought certified copies from those register of deeds offices. You know, it's like, hey, where do you think I got these?
So I know I was on the board for the last classification wage study, and I didn't have a whole lot of input in it. I think administration pretty much ran the show and gave us information to act on it without knowing the background always. But I think we have good administration now that will keep everybody engaged and get your input. And I think there's you go through the process, and I think you have an appeal process in that study too. And we'll be more engaged through this time. I can guarantee it.
Well, and I think one of the problems that we had with the last study, because we filled the study out in April of 2016, and it was implemented in 2020. By 2020, if you know anything about the industry that we're in, by 2020, those descriptions were outdated. That's not even the job we were performing in 2020. What we listed in 2016, you know, technology moves way too fast for that. So I think, you know, it's like you're talking about, you fill that out, you have to act on that at the time, because if you don't, you wait that long, that's not the job that these people are going to be performing at that point in time.
I think you agree with me in this, that the fact that we're engaged in this as opposed to maybe in prior administrations, very engaged in this process. And we understand the sense of urgency in this. From your standpoint, I hope board will understand at least my sense of urgency in this, because again, wait 4 years or better to implement a wage study, to me is just, boy, that's crazy. No, it doesn't work.
And in actually, on the pandemic year wasn't the best situation for anybody to have.
Dynamics have really
Responded.
changed. They have.
Yes, they have, very much so.
So one last quick thing, and I'm sure this is a general thought, but just to play an antagonist because it was brought up. I do think, you know, despite the previous comments on that 2.5% wage increase and how that creates a larger disparity, I do still think that with these being frozen and no changes happening, those employees are still going to appreciate that wage increase. So just because those comments were made earlier and it may be in someone's head, I just wanted to make the comment that even though we can't obviously move anyone up right now, I think they would still appreciate that 2.5% increase and may even be relying on it coming.
Good.
Any other public comments? Then we'll adjourn this meeting with the Finance and Administration Committee. Thank you very much.
Appreciate your input.